Hey everybody, welcome to the Herd Fit Podcast with Dr. Sam Rhee and myself, Coach David Syvertsen. This podcast is aimed at helping anyone and everyone looking to enhance their healthy lifestyle through fitness, nutrition, and most importantly, mindset. All right, welcome back to the Herd Fit Podcast. I am Coach David Syvertsen. I'm here with Dr. and Coach Sam Rhee, and we have a very special guest today. This is Officer and CrossFit Bison Beast, Sean O'Hara. Sean, welcome to the Herd Fit Podcast.
Thank you, guys. It's so great to be here.
Yes. Sean came to us a couple months ago, and Sean's an avid listener of the Herd Fit Podcast. And he brought up the possibility of us doing an episode or episodes, plural, on mental health. And it's a very, very well talked about, often talked about subject in today's world. And I think a lot of it does stem from the COVID-19 pandemic. A lot of things got exposed at that certain point. And I think it actually, in a good way, opened the door for a lot of us to talk about our own mental health, helping others that have potential mental health issues, how to notice them, how to combat them. And I was all about it. And here we are. We're a couple months after we actually started talking about this because it's impossible to line up everyone's schedules. But Sean, opening thoughts on why you came to us and wanted to talk about the mental health component to health.
It was pretty funny. I actually first approached Mike Delator about it. And if you know anything about Mike, I got half the idea out of my mouth. Dude, you have to do it. Yeah, you have to go to Dave. You have to talk to him about it.
Yeah.
I have several experiences, both family, friends, work-related, a lot of just experience over my past 9-10 years of being in some sort of mental health space in terms of dealing with friends and family, handling stress at work, handling my own mental health conditions and whatnot. So it was just something that just kind of leapt to the forefront. And I know we always talk about mindset and everything else like that, and health and fitness. And then this was just kind of like a perfect tie-in to sit there and say, well, let's try to, how does mental health going to help us in terms of just our overall health and even in the fitness world?
Absolutely.
Just give us a little bit of background about yourself and who you are and, how you, so that people who don't know Bison or know you can get to know you and frame this talk a little bit.
Sure. So I've been at Bison now. It's going to be 4 years, the end of October. I really can't believe that. I am a police officer in Bergen County, in one of the bigger cities in Bergen County. I'm coming into maybe 9.5, close to 10 years now.
Wow.
Doing, which again seems like just yesterday that
Crazy,
we were
right?
doing that.
How
It's
fast
just,
10 years go.
It certainly flies. And then I have, a lot of my family have been in several professions, a medical health field, military, law enforcement, and dealing with these high stress and unanticipated mental health issues, actually.
Interesting.
So.
Funny story about when Sean joined the gym. We got an email we have this inquiry system where someone sends an email saying, I'm interested in your gym. What are my next steps? And the name was Sean O'Hara, and I was like, that's the New York Giants center.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, I knew he was a local guy. I saw him at Whole Foods one time in Ridgewood, and I was like, here we go. I'm like texting Ash. I was like, the Giants center is coming to our gym. And, I'm waiting in the gym. Sean O'Hara, arranges to come in at 3:00 on a Monday, whatever it was. And Sean walked in the door. I'm like, what's up, bro? And no, Sean's been a joy to be around. I've coached Sean in classes for a long time. I know a lot of other people have coached him, and he's one of the, I would say, 10 people in the gym that light the gym up when he comes in. He's always fun to work out with because the dude tries hard every single time, whether he's feeling good or not, whether he's going through stressful situations at work or not. It's never brought into the gym in a negative sense. And I really think it's, there's a lot of people in our gym that are drawn to him and respect him a lot, but also just have like a good mix of respect for Sean for what he does and what he goes through, but also what he does at the gym. The dude works his ass off. He's come such a long way. He's one of the strongest brute strength people we have in the gym as well. And I don't think, honestly, you might have not even known that until you started doing this. Like, your powerlifting, the squatting, the deadlifting, and it's been a joy to be around, and we're really glad you came on.
And the 9:30 a.m. mom.
Yeah, Sean, what is your fantasy football team?
Well, this year it got deleted. It was I Heart 930 Mom, but this year actually, I guess we changed leagues or something.
I mixed up the league, so you can still be I Heart 930 Mom.
Oh no, it's no. So we came up with a new name. It says My Moms Are Harder Than Yours. So that is now my fantasy name for this year's Bison League.
That's awesome. All right, so we're just so you guys know, we're gonna kind of break this up, we think, into a couple different episodes. We don't have it completely regimented. We're gonna kind of let the conversation flow. We don't like being restricted to certain things, but this is probably gonna turn into 2 or 3 different episodes because there's a lot to this. There's a lot to unravel here. And the first thing that we really kind of want to go into is just talk about the differences and even some of the similarities that you guys feel between mental and physical health. All right. One of our taglines for this podcast, it really does center around health, fitness, health, mindset. Right. And let's just really briefly kind of get into the introduction of, the differences between mental and physical health. And the first thing that Sean wrote on his outline was there are not many differences. So let's talk about that real quick. What do you mean by that?
So when we talk about mental and physical health, in terms of just how we approach ourselves is very different, but in terms of how we should be approaching it is fairly similar in terms of how we handle certain stressors, how we handle certain injuries, how we handle ourselves in many different aspects of it. So I think in the mental health arena, the way that we handle our physical health needs to be the way that we handle our mental health. And, kind of going on that, one of the first questions I asked, and probably not the best guys to answer just because of your career professions, but I always asked, I said, how many days when you were at your job or when you were working like a 9-to-5 job, would you call in and say, I had a sick day today? You weren't feeling good and you had to call out because you needed to take care of your physical health.
Mm-hmm.
And how many days did you call in and say, you know what? I need a mental health day.
Yeah.
Because I'm so stressed out, I'm anxious, I'm run down, and I just need a day to kind of gather myself.
Mhm.
Your boss would laugh at you.
Yeah.
He'd look at you, he or she would look at you and say, what do you mean a mental health day?
Yep.
Get into work and suck it up.
Yep.
So it's been an approach of where we need to treat it the same, but we don't see it the same way.
Right. Right.
We certainly don't.
Why do we think that is? Is it because physical health that prevents me from going to work, there's usually something objective, right? It's usually I have a fever, I have strep throat, I have COVID, right? Where it's like, hey, something is on a piece of paper or on a thermometer and says, you should not go to work because of this physical objective number or result of a test, medical test that says you shouldn't go to work. And the mental state of saying like, hey, I feel like I need it. That is where I think it's hard on both sides. It's hard for a boss to say, okay, like you're having a bad day, because where's the line drawn? Like a line drawn on a fever is like, hey, if you're above 99, like, yeah, maybe stay home for the day, right? Or 99.5, whatever. But on the mental health, what is the objective line? Where do you feel the differences are in there in that?
So if somebody has a fever,
Yeah.
we'll just use that, or has, a cold or the flu or something like
Right.
that. They can transmit it to other people in the
Right.
company or the business or wherever it is that you're working. So I think a lot of it, the sick days are, I don't want you coming into work sick and then knocking out my entire workforce, as
Correct.
opposed to you being, well, you need to take care of yourself.
Yeah.
And I think that's where it is, if like as a mental health problem, I can't spread my bad day mentally
Right.
with someone else.
Right.
It's, well, I need this day for me.
Right.
So a lot of that, and like you said, the objectivity of it is like, well, are you just feeling have a bad day? Suck it up.
Right.
Or no, wow, you're really going through a lot of stress. You need to decompress. You need to take care of yourself. Go home, relax, rest,
Yep.
and get yourself collectively together.
Right.
And that's hard because a lot of people will sit there and think, "Hey, he's just using the day just to get out of work."
Yeah. And
Yeah.
because the sad part and the unfortunate part is that there are people that will do that.
Yeah.
And that's where it's like almost it's a disrespectful thing for someone to not want to go to work and just say, hey, I'm going to play the mental health card. Because from a boss perspective, like if Sam came to me on Tuesday night at 9 p.m. and said, hey, I'm not going to coach tomorrow morning because I'm going through something, I know Sam well enough like I would not hesitate to say, done, I'll cover for you tomorrow. Right? He could text me at 4 a.m. and say that.
Right.
An hour before he's got to coach, and I would go and coach for him.
Actually, I think people have done that. Like they
Yeah.
let you know, like I'm really overwhelmed right now.
Yes. Yeah.
And I
need
need
to
some
switch it up.
help.
Yeah.
And you've always been very supportive about that.
Yeah. And that's where, and we work in a very personal business. Like we care about each other. We know each other. I've had the 9 to 5, and you're a number to them.
Yeah.
Right. You really are. You're an employee. If I quit, I did quit, I'd be replaced the next day. Like I don't feel that way about our coaches, right? Like if I had
Sure.
some of these guys quit, it would take me a long time to fill them. Even though I have people on the outside that want to coach, I view all of my coaches as really hard to replace. And so I don't want to go down that road, but my point is this, that in relation to someone that does need a mental health day, it can actually be clouded. It could be that whole aura around the mental health day can be made gray because there are people out there that will take advantage of it. And it's like hiding or creating something that does not exist for some people in a way that physical health, that to me is the biggest difference between physical health and mental health in this regard. I mean, we're talking about sick days, mental health days. We'll get deeper into it.
Sure.
But what do you think about that? Just quick thoughts on, the actual difference between mental and physical health are real, but because of personalities and because of people, human nature, though, I think that is the reason why some view mental health days as, hey, that's not real. You need to suck it up.
Yeah, I agree. There are always going to be people that are going to take advantage of the system. There's always going to be somebody that's looking to scam, to get over, and unfortunately in more numbers than we even probably care to admit to.
Mm-hmm.
So as a business owner or as a boss of a company, I have to protect myself from sitting there and saying, well,
being taken advantage of.
How am I going to be taken advantage of? And unfortunately, this is what we see in society, that we're just not responsible enough to sit there and give people the benefit of the doubt, to sit there and say, okay, listen, I'm only going to use these days, or I'm only going to call out of work if I really, really need it, whether I'm sick or whether I need a mental health day, or whether I just need to take care of myself. Like you said, in smaller businesses, it's great because you as the business owner know your people.
Right.
You know that if one of the coaches comes up to you and says, listen, I just need this day, you're like, done. I get it. Because you know they would never do that unless they actually needed it.
Absolutely.
And that's unfortunately part of the problem that we face in terms of dealing with mental health.
Yes.
Is that you said it is not something that I can sit there and hand you a piece of paper and says, my doctor says I have 102 fever and my blood work is this and I'm diagnosed with this, and it's very, very.
And this is why I wanted you to say that. That was awesome answer, is that the people that are having mental health issues, they get beaten down even further because of this, right? If you're someone that does have a mental health issue and it's obvious that you have a mental health issue and you need whether it's a day, a week, it could be longer, right? Because of the irresponsibility of other people, that it's now a stigma.
Right.
It's like you're weak. You're just using it so you can get out of work. And that's where I think that builds up that increases the strength of the mental health issue, and it really can overtake someone.
Absolutely. You pinned the word on the head. It is stigma. And there is different forms of stigma, different areas of stigma. And this is just one area of, people maybe taking advantage of it. And then, we can move down into the different types of stigma that we see attached to mental health in terms of making somebody weak, making somebody a coward, making somebody feel like they are taking advantage of the system. Unfortunately, there's just so much.
And then the issue never gets solved.
No, it never gets solved. It never gets touched. And then people become embarrassed to sit there and say, I have an issue. I need to address it.
Yep.
And when we talk about the comparisons of physical and mental health, you get a cut on your finger. You put a Band-Aid on it.
Yep.
You have a bad day. Do you just keep it to yourself? Is there somebody that you can talk to about it? Even for just 10 minutes, you break a bone, you go see a doctor.
Right.
Doctor looks at it, he x-rays it, he sets it and everything else like that. You have a trauma in your life. Most people will just sit there and say, I got to suck it up. I got to deal with it. I got to live. That's how it's supposed to be.
Right.
And we have these parallels of the different types of injuries that we can have both physically and mentally. We take care of them when they're physical injuries.
Right.
Because I can sit there and say, hey, Dave, I really screwed up my knee the other day. I'm going to see Hartman. I'm going to see Marty for some physical therapy. I'm waiting to see if I can get an MRI, and I can go through the steps, and okay. All right. Well, this is what we can do in this gym. This is how we can work around this. This is how we're going to treat this. If I came to you sometime and said, Dave, I just had a really severe trauma in my life, like something that's just, I can't, it's keeping me up at night. It's affecting me. How is it that I'm going to treat this and everything? That's the way it needs to be done.
Yeah.
I can come into the gym next day and you can look at me and says, well, Sean seems to be okay. maybe something's a little off, but you don't know that I have that trauma and I'm not
Yes.
addressing it.
Exactly.
And that's where we see the divide.
It's not like an objective, viewable thing.
Correct.
I don't
Exactly.
I don't see you limping into the gym. You know, like if I see
Exactly.
you limping, something's wrong.
Yes.
Alert goes on. I go talk. If I see you moping around a little bit, I'm like, I don't know, maybe he's hungover. You know, it's
Right. Yeah, exactly.
It could be
Had a rough night.
It could be a lot of different things.
I think some of this is also from a chronic perspective. So if you think about it, let's suppose you're really devoted to your job and you don't spend any time working out, eating right. What happens? You physically start gaining weight, you get heavy, you're not fit, and ultimately that impacts your physical health. You can do the same thing with your mental health. Let's suppose you are not addressing those issues that you have in your life that are causing you mental stress.
Right.
And over time, if you don't address those, if you don't take the time from work, from all of your other activities to address it, just like going to the gym takes time.
Yes.
You know, working out takes time. All these things, if you neglect them over time because to focus on only work, guess what happens? 5, 10 years go by. Not only are you physically bad, but you're mentally in a horrible state. And I see this all the time in my profession. People over, that was me, 5, 10, 15 years into a career, and you are worse off than you ever have been. And you can see it from, like you said, a physical perspective.
Yes.
You can look at someone and be like, whoa, you haven't really been taking care of yourself.
Right.
But what's going on in here?
Yeah.
You have some people have major issues over 5, 10, 15 years that they never addressed. You might not be able to see it right away, but it's just as impactful to their health and life as what their physical appearance is.
Yeah. Common ground between what you guys are both saying is it's easy to see physical issues popping up, physical health issues.
Yes.
It's not easy to see the mental health issues. Like again, you can say it's suck it up nature, being a man, being masculine, can't be sensitive, right? There's a lot about that, but everyone has something going on inside their head. Not everyone will really expose it to the public. And I give you a lot of respect for coming on here and just, opening up about this subject, Sean.
Oh, yeah, no, absolutely.
The last thing before we get into the manifestation, physical manifestations from mental health, similarities between physical and mental health issues. And you said something earlier that a little bit of a kickback on is, yes, your boss does not want you to come to work when you have COVID, when you have a flu, because you don't want to get other people sick. One of the similarities that I've seen with mental health issues, and again, mental health issues have different levels, right? Severe, right? Not severe, right? But there's still issues. Those days where you do suck it up and still go to work, still go to the gym, they actually can really bring a room down or bring people that you're around down as well. And this is something that I've personally struggled with, but I've seen other people struggle with as well. That when you're not in a good place, and you're no longer a joy to be around, right? And you're not good at, keeping it out of the gym, right? Not saying that you need to. I'm not saying you need to keep your issues out of the gym. Like, we're here to help, not just with your muscle ups, but with other stuff as well, right? That can bring a room down. I've seen our staff be impacted by people that are in a bad place. I've been impacted by people on our staff that are in a bad place. I know I've impacted other people. That when I'm in a bad place, I'm making things worse for other people. It's like I'm almost unofficially infecting them with my mental health. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's part of some of the things that we might get into is just how we as outside people can affect each other both positively and negatively due to our mental health. And there absolutely is credence to that, as opposed to how my actions and my mood and my mental health and my mental well-being can actually affect others. And I know Sam has talked about this a bunch of times on the show in terms of his responsibility about how he acts after a workout. What is his body language? What is he dictating to people in and doing a workout? Yeah. And he says, I have to be more responsible to that because the way I'm acting and the way I'm presenting myself is affecting other people in the gym when they're looking at this workout. Yep. So there absolutely is credence to that. When I go back to that affecting is kind of, you hit it on the head in terms of we just can't see a day or two of that. That's something that may, for the most part, take a week or so of a long time to sit there and kind of spread itself around to, wow, Dave's really been in a funk this past week. Yeah. And he's been irritable and short and all this other stuff, very curt with his workouts and such. And now how am I supposed to feel?
Right.
I don't think you see that today. Everybody kind of chalks up, well, you had a bad day. All right.
Right,
You know,
yeah.
you get a pass. You had a bad day. You had a rough day.
Yeah,
That,
yeah,
you
yeah.
know, that's one of those things. But over time, absolutely. You can
Yeah.
definitely see that kind of fester in through a community or a workplace and,
Yep.
and absolutely affect people.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, when you're a leader and if you have a lot of toxicity because of whatever that you have to deal with, you really impact all those people around you. Not and forget about your performance. Even if you feel like, well, my performance is fine. I'm coaching. I'm saying the right things. I'm telling them to do the right things. But like you said, so much of what we do as human beings is feed off of each other.
Absolutely.
And especially in a CrossFit gym, the one of the most strong reasons why we come is for this sense of community
Yep.
and working out together. And most workplace environments also have similar senses of community where when you have people that are extremely toxic because they are not recognizing their mental health issues, or they're ignoring them, or they're not given a chance to address them, that can torpedo a business, a company, a gym. You've said it all the time. I mean, that is one of the biggest things you've always thought about. Was one of the things that could torpedo a gym would be that negative type of interaction.
Negative culture. Yeah. And it can happen like that. You know, I mean, it's like a fear you have in the back of your head all the time. You could build something for 10 years. It could take a week for the whole thing to it could take a night, one night of, speaking of which, we're recording this on the night where there's a bunch of people going to the racetrack tonight. It can happen like that. It can happen that fast. And that's just part of the risk you take when you do something like this. I want to get into some, with Sean's permission,
Yes, absolutely.
just some life examples that Sean has gone through, some physical manifestations that have come from his mental health. And, we did talk to Sean, just so everyone knows, we did talk to Sean prior to this about what he does want to touch on, what he doesn't want to touch on. So I don't want to make sure no one's listening to this and be like, guys, stop being so nosy. Like this is Sean's show. This is Sean's topic. Sean is the director of the Hurt Fit podcast.
I get a promotion for a day. This is great.
Sam and I are W-2 employees. All right. $100 an hour, by the way.
See my account afterwards.
But I want to get into some, because I do think a lot of us, myself included, Sam included, our listeners, right? We can learn a lot from your experience. And I just to echo what I said earlier, give you a lot of credit for coming on and talking about a topic that's really tough to talk about. But let's get into some of your life examples. Just, living with anxiety, you're a police officer. Like, let's get into some of the nitty gritty with that stuff.
Sure. So first off, and again, something we'll touch in later, is that this is actually helpful for me as somebody that lives with this, that does this kind of stuff all the time. A platform like this is very, very helpful for my well-being and my treatment, and to be able to kind of give people what I see in my life and what I'm going through in my life, because there are going to be a lot of people that are going to be out there and sit there and say, wow, I have the same thing. I'm going through the same thing.
Yep.
And I just can't talk about it, or don't feel comfortable talking about it.
It's awesome.
And, so I'm hoping that by doing this is going to, a couple people that are listening to it, this will kind of help them to take a step in the right direction in terms of just kind of helping them deal with that. So in my life, I've come up in a very great family, grew up in Bergen County. But within my family, we have had a lot of anxiety different issues. I've had family that served in the military that have come back and have been through several different mental health issues that they have gone through. Family that has been in the medical field, in law enforcement, that have dealt in high stress, high anxiety issues, high pressure issues that they come home with. And
your exposure to that, can you touch on approximately how old you were when you started to notice it?
Oh, sure. Wow. So I'm probably going to sit there and say I was probably like in middle school when you finally come around and sit there and say,
You're 37? 36?
36. Yeah.
36. Okay.
Yep.
So you're looking 25 years ago. 20,
oh, yeah.
2022. Okay.
Yeah. So we're looking at like, in the late 90s.
Yeah.
We're talking about this, and you start to notice something. You can't tell what it is, but you can tell something's not right. You can tell something's going on. And as you grow up, you don't know anything else. So this is almost normalized in your life, as opposed to, this is how people are, this is how people act, this is how people deal with things. And again, we go back to that culture of, we don't talk about things. Mm-hmm. This is how we handle it. We are a strong, proud family. Mm-hmm. This is how we go through life.
Yep.
And, this is right and wrong. And that's how life was.
And there's some families that, just like my history of growing up and knowing a lot of people, there are certain families that it almost seems like they all go towards not the same line of work, but the same macro level
Yeah.
of whether it's extra education, whether it's high stress environment, whether it's I wear a gun to work,
Right.
whether I'm putting my life on the line, I'm running to the fire, not away
Sure.
from the fire. Is that kind of where your family vibe came from? Not everyone I know, but a lot of people in your family come from that kind of line of work.
So my immediate family wasn't involved in law enforcement at all.
Okay.
That was actually a surprise to them when I got into it.
Okay.
High stress, yes. My mother was in the medical field. She ran the chemistry lab in Hackensack Hospital she was there for 44 years.
Wow.
And my father was a safety engineer, and he was constantly out doing commercial inspecting for OSHA. So he was traveling a lot. He was out on these oil rigs in Oklahoma and Texas.
And a lot of responsibility for the safety of others.
Yes. So, and dealing with the culture of, hey, listen, I'll give you $300 to give me some good marks on the line too. And he's sitting there saying, thousands of guys' lives are on the line for $300.
It's a lot of pressure on a person. It's a lot of pressure.
So we have seen a lot of high stress, high anxiety. So when I chose the job, my parents kind of looked at me knowing what they went through, and they're like, do I really want to see my son get into this?
Yeah.
I will tell you, my mother was not happy with the choice they were supportive.
Yes.
They were always supportive of me.
Parents always want what's best for the kids. You're going to be closer to that than I am, Sam, but you're not going to make them do certain things, but you also probably have certain things like, oh man, that's going to be really tough or tougher than you think. Just late watching Sasha go through the college stuff.
Yeah.
Sure.
You always have anxiety about whatever it is that your children choose. And I mean, obviously law enforcement is not something that everyone's like, oh, cake and,
Right. Yeah, exactly.
so easy. Not a problem.
Yeah.
Exactly. The funny thing that I found out was, it took me a while to realize that I actually had some sort of anxiety issues.
Okay.
And it was a couple of years ago that I actually was having some stomach problems. And I was sitting there, I was like, it's not going away. I'm having some indigestion. I'm having some lower abdominal pain. And it's just, no matter what I did. And so I went to see a GI doctor, let's figure this out, And I went to this guy, and very great guy, talked to me for, I think it was an hour. I sat in his office and really went over things.
Okay.
And he kind of narrowed it down. He's like, listen, I want you to try this. He gave me some sort of, it was a little bit of medication. I forget what it was. It was, I don't want to call it a muscle relaxer.
Yeah.
But it was just kind of a little something to calm me down. And he said, address your diet.
Yeah.
He's like, yeah, I'm going to sit there and say, address your diet. And if things don't change, come back to me after a certain period of time. I think it was 2 or 3 weeks. And he's like, then we'll take the next step forward. And things kind of went away, but that's when I started to notice a pattern. It would come back, it would go away. It would come back, it would go away. My anxiety got to a point where it was developing physical manifestations in me.
Wow.
There was a sharp pain in my abdomen, my lower right abdomen, every time I was getting myself into a high stress situation that I had time to think about.
Can you describe one of them?
Sure. So I'll give you a social thing like that, especially with people that I didn't know.
Okay.
So if I was going to like a big wedding of a lot of people I didn't know, some sort of uncomfortable situation, and I had time to sit there and watch it come.
Yep.
And I would think in my head, I was like, oh, okay, I'm not going to know a lot of people here. I may be a little uncomfortable. It's a little far away from home, all of this stuff. But like the inner dialogue would start to kind of run in your head when you sit there and you say, and then all of a sudden, maybe like a day or two out, I would start to feel like this pain coming. And it was more than just you get butterflies before a workout, you get nervous before a workout.
Just talk about it.
and you kind of have that buildup. It was getting past that to the point of maybe I shouldn't go because I'm just feeling that sick and I don't want to feel this way there.
Yep.
And as I went through these, I started to feel that once I was at the event and got to talk to people and know people, that went away.
Okay.
That was gone.
Okay.
And part of it was just my physical body. Like in my head, I could tell myself everything's going to be okay. There's nothing. My head could talk. My body was like, I'm not listening to you. This is the way I feel. Sharp pain there. My blood pressure was going up. So I have white coat. which is white coat is a very high fluctuation in your blood pressure.
Okay.
You can be very high, and then 20 minutes later it'll be low, and then 20 minutes it'll be high.
Wow.
And depending on given situations, I can have blood pressure that would sit there and be like, you're borderline in the emergency room, but they'll come back 10 minutes later and be like, that's actually not so bad.
Yeah.
So I do take medication for that. And that's part and tied into the anxiety that helps keep the anxiety lower. And in keeping the blood pressure lower, I'm not sick. I don't have these physical manifestations. So I don't have that circle of I'm sick. What am I doing? Oh, I'm high anxiety. And it just kind of chases itself in a tail of having, I'm, getting in this circle of stuff.
Wow.
So that's kind of how like I first noticed that I have this. And then going through some of the stuff with my job of realizing that, okay, what's some of the things that have happened in my job that I deal with, that I've dealt with of, okay, well, again, suck it up. All right. It's not a big deal. And then you start to hit all these things and they start to come in and not nearly as often as you might see in other departments, some of the bigger cities and everything else like that, but we deal with them all the time.
Yeah.
And we're now starting to see a shift towards being more responsible for mental health, giving you more resources, giving you more education. And I think education is the biggest thing.
Yep.
There is everybody's so different in their mental health and what affects them. And people may not deal with anxiety. They may deal with a little bit of depression. They may deal with high stress situations. They may deal with many different things.
Okay.
And how you deal with it is going to be different than Sam deals with it, different than I deal with it. Mm-hmm. So I could give you a template as to how I deal with my anxiety. Right. But if you have anxiety too, you may be completely different. You say, Sean, this does not work for me.
Is your anxiety, is it worse in those like, hey, pre-wedding situations, you're not going to know a lot of people, than your job, your profession, where there is a lot of, I don't want to call it downtime, but think that you're thinking about something that could happen. And all of a sudden you're thrown into the mix without, it's almost like when you don't get to think about it and reflect that much, it's actually easier to deal with.
Yes.
But you are still in the car waiting for something to happen, right? In your cruiser waiting for, I don't even know what you guys call them anymore. I just date myself.
Just a little bit. Back in like chips mode.
But like, do you, in those times where nothing is going on, but law of average eventually catches up, something's going to happen. Is that anxiety different than the anxiety that you'd felt leading up to that wedding? Because officer is more about safety, life and death, and weddings, I don't know anybody who am I going to dance with on the dance floor. It's like,
for me, it's 100% different.
Okay.
What I deal with outside of work is, and the anxiety in that portion is extremely different. And that's what I found kind of interesting. For me, I would much rather a situation where it's situation, react.
Yes.
Go to it. Don't have time to think. That's what we're trained to do. So our training is, we're going to give you a whole lot of training. We're going to give you a whole lot of reps at it. So if I told you right now to go out and do 20 bar muscle ups, you could do it without even having to think about your form or anything else like that. You could, you may want to stretch and warm up, but
right.
You would be able to sit there and not have to think about how you're going to do 20 bar muscle ups. That's how it is at work.
I'm going to tie this across it when you're done with this story. Keep going.
So, but in terms of the planning at work and the downtime at work and everything, we have learned to, yes, you do have to plan. So there is going to be inevitable planning. There's going to be, okay, if I ever get to a call, that's more so when you first start out.
Right.
When you're developing that set of, I have a burglar alarm to go to. You don't have
experience yet.
Right. That's exactly it.
Yeah.
Once you have that knowledge of how you're going to address things, I'm going to stop a car. I'm going to do this. I'm going to go. A person just got beat up and they're bleeding, and I have to now. I'm the first person to render medical aid to them.
Right.
How am I going to do that?
Right.
Get a little anxiety from that. Once you know that, once you've done that, once you've been through that situation, that stuff's just automatic. And you can think, okay, well, how am I going to approach this, or how am I going to talk to this person? But that stuff, that goes away very quickly.
Okay.
Especially when you get thrown in the mix, and the more, just like anything else in life, the more you do, the more you do
social functions for you personally. Like if you got invited to a wedding that's in 3 months and you only know 3 of the people, you're still going to be going through this anxiety a little bit.
Oh yeah. Absolutely. 100%.
Yeah. Even though you've been through it before.
Yes.
It's not nearly as often, and it's not as there's just more reflection time on it.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's really what probably does that bother you more? That's the anxiety that's worse.
Yes. So that's the anxiety that would that I have dealt with and have found to be more physically manifested in myself, both mentally and physically.
Got it.
Of dealing with that.
That's why this gets so personal. It's so like case by case.
Yes.
description when you really think and reflect about it. And again, if you're in a position where you're trying to help someone with their mental health, and not that, I mean, I'm definitely, we're not qualified. I don't have credibility in fixing someone's mental health. But if you're just in this situation with a social interaction in a position with people that you know they have mental health and you can help them just as a person, you really do. And you have to ask questions like what we're doing right now, like asking like, what's this like? Instead of saying, oh, no. I remember Sean told me that this was worse than that. So like that person, the next time I see a person struggling with mental health, they're going through the same thing as him. It really can be the complete opposite side of it. Yes. And I think that's one thing with mental health that is different than physical health in some regards, is that there really is not a template to fix, or help you with your issues, right? It's dealing with someone that has physical health issues, it's a little bit more scientific, right? Like I know not everyone gets the same treatment, but it seems like it's more templated than someone with mental health.
Yeah, but it's still, there's so much variation. Like for example, if someone has a shoulder injury,
right?
My shoulder injury and your shoulder injury ain't the same,
right?
Even if we had the same shoulder injury, because of our circumstances, and our expectations and our goals and what we need to do. And in mental health, this is where listening to Sean talk about his manifestation, two things strike me. One is how powerful the mind-body connection is. That is amazing. How the mind literally wills the body into physical change. Which is the biggest issue here. Sure. And so anyone who says it's in your head really wants to say, no, it's in your body because it's in your head. That's the first thing. And that power that we have in our mind is astonishing. And then the second thing is that there's no one, like you said, there's no one way to address whatever it is that your issue is. And I know there are thousands of people out there thinking, yes, this is the way to do it. This is what I did to make it better. Yes, absolutely. There are so many treatments, so many approaches, so many therapies, so many ways. Some of them not so great. Some people will drink themselves into submission of their anxiety. So, other people
eat themselves into it.
Abuse. There are millions of types of self-abuse that you can go down to try to address these issues. And so basically some of this is recognizing that the mind-body connection is really important. And two is there's not one way of addressing it. And I know that there are a lot of people who deal with this on a professional level. I was just thinking of Marissa Lisa and her acupuncture, for example. There's a lot of people who find value in that treatment. And there are 10,000 other ones as well. That's just one other example. So I feel like listening to this, one, I would say we all probably have some level of this in different manifestations. And then two, the way we deal with it is all different. But hearing someone like you, going through this is really meaningful, because then I can kind of connect it to myself as well.
Yeah, part of it is, and again, I want to just touch back on stigma just a little bit, of being able to bring this forward. Is if we never are honest with ourselves as to what's going on with ourselves, our body, our minds, our whatever, we'll never address it. We will never get better. And we have seen several times of people building this up, like you were talking about earlier, Sam, of just like this powder keg that's building inside of us for 5, 6, 7, 10 years. And nothing ever good comes out of that, because the more pressure you apply to something, the more likely it is that it's going to break, it's going to collapse, something's going to majorly happen. You're not going to have a little leak in the dam. If you have 20 years of pressure on that one little leak, that dam's going to go. And it's just going to be,
it's going to explode.
It's going just to be, and poorly for all of this stuff. So the first thing that I always, when I speak about, mental health, and I've had conversations with people, is just be honest with yourself. And that's what I get, is the minute that I sat there and said, these physical manifestations are not medical, that I don't have a GI problem. They're being caused by what's going on in my head. Then I was able to sit there and say, what can I do about the situation? How can I fix this? So being honest with myself and actually sitting there saying, okay, I have an issue. Maybe I don't like it. Maybe I don't like the fact that I have to sit there and say, you have high anxiety. But it's something that just needed to be addressed. And I had to sit there and say, okay, if I want to do anything with this, I have to be honest. This is a problem. Okay, I have it. Can't do anything about, pushing it away. Now, how do I solve this? How do I deal with it?
Seek the outside help.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
The other thing I was going to say is, as a parent, we can make things worse or better for our kids when we recognize these issues. I know my parents didn't make any of my high anxiety issues any better and probably exacerbated them. And I think for a lot of us, it's better now in terms of our culture. But I mean, think about the people around us. How do we feel, or if we heard someone who said, I have a lot of anxiety about this type of situation, would we react negatively? Would we be supportive? Would we be dismissive? And I know my parents, how they would react, and it would be super negative. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah.
And so I just want to remind people that I think, especially me as a parent, I don't want to make certain situations that are similar worse. And I would like to try to think that I could be supportive in that situation.
Yeah, like what's one thing, Sean, that you would want someone on the outside to know? Doesn't even have to be about your personal situation, but let's say that there's someone out there right now that is struggling with something that you've struggled with. They haven't told anyone yet. And what could others do to help that person, if anything? We do know it's the personal responsibility of the one that's suffering from mental health to seek outside help. And I said something earlier, that the people on the other side of it ask more questions, don't assume you know, right? Like, have more conversations that are actually back and forth.
Sure.
What are some things that you think other people should know that can help others that have the potential issue you had?
Some of the biggest things, and I think we deal with this, and I'm 100% guilty of this, you need to be a good listener. Of people want to talk to you, to tell you when they finally do build up the courage to sit there and say, okay, now I'm going to go talk to somebody. So I'm going to sit down, and I see Sam in the gym, and I know he's got about 15, 20 minutes in between a class or something like that. I have, as a person dealing with this, I have earmarked Sam as that's the person who I'm going to feel the most comfortable talking to about this.
Yep.
When I go up to Sam, I'm hoping Sam is going to be open to talking, and actually more open to listening.
Yeah.
What people most times don't want to hear right off the bat is you tell them what's going on. Sam, I'm dealing with some GI pain. I don't think it's medical. I think it's more so my mental health and my high anxiety. And the last thing I really want to hear out of Sam is, oh, you know what? The other week I was kind of dealing with the GI issue too. And, I went to see this guy and
I crushed this workout, and then after
that's exactly it.
Yeah.
That's exactly it. But that can happen down the road in the conversation.
Yep.
They just want somebody to open up, to listen to them, just to kind of get that initial, wow, I just kind of got this off of me. Somebody else knows.
Got it.
And it's not always, and for people listening to this, it does not have to be, and this is going to be hard for a lot of people. It doesn't have to be a close friend, a spouse, a family member. And I know I'm not married, but I know both of you guys are. And this may not sit well of, if Sam has an issue and his wife is sitting there, she may expect Sam to come with him saying, Sam, I'm your wife. Talk to me, about your issue. That may not work for Sam.
I agree.
Sam may have to come in and talk to Nick Squire about it.
I agree. Yeah.
And that may just be one of those things that's the way Sam is going to deal with this particular issue of whatever it is he needs to get off of his chest or what he wants to talk about.
Right.
So he knows that he's just going to feel more comfortable. And it means it is never a slight to your significant other, your family, your best friends, or anything else like that.
Yep.
And I know that's hard.
No, I know.
Because they're there, because they want to be there. They want to, like, I want to help you.
At some point, those people will have a role in you getting better.
Yes, 100%.
They just might not be the first step.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
That's exactly it.
Don't be insulted, Susan. I will talk.
Now, and then the last thing, we'll wrap this up because our next episode we're going to kind of tie in the fitness, the element to this, right? Is, when someone does approach you and they are wanting to, in some cases, someone, wants to get off their chest, but they want feedback.
Yeah.
Feedback, and we just talked about this on last week's episode, that the feedback doesn't always need to be, all right, this is how you're going to solve your issue. Right. If Sean or someone else comes to you and there's a mental health issue, that's like the underlying issue, they're not always looking for the solution. There are personalities. I'm one of them. I know Sam is one of them. It's like, all right, let's solve this. Like, all right, so Sean, like you're doing this, like let's go eat some kale and broccoli, and your
Right,
your
exactly.
stomach's gonna be better, right? And let's go do Fran too, just because, right? Like that's you might be like, dude, that's not what's gonna help me get over my hurdle. I think one of the biggest things we can all do as people is, I think a big part of listening is asking questions. And because I think it can actually open up the door for the person that's struggling with the mental health to actually say things that they haven't even thought yet because they have not been asked that question. I think that's one of the biggest purposes of someone that's listening. If you do want to value yourself as a listener, and some people are better than others, right? The actual listening, right, is ask them questions that could actually give them a different angle, and you actually might get more words out of your mouth.
Yes.
Like right now, talking about this is helping you, right?
Absolutely.
Sam and I talk about this all the time in the podcast, off the record, that when we do these, it actually helps us kind of understand our own thoughts, understand each other, and understand what other people are going through. And that is what something I think people can do when they're listening, is really put effort into asking more questions so that you get to do more of the talking, and now you both have a more common ground.
For sure. That shows a level of, I don't necessarily want to say interest, but it shows a level of, okay, I am now here listening to you, trying to understand you.
Invested in you.
Exactly. That's the greatest word for it. I am going to be invested in what you have to say and anything else like that. And I know this was going to be a little tough on you, because I know in podcasts before I've listened to you always sit there and say, if you don't have a solution to present, a lot of times you don't want to bring up the issue without having, may not be the right solution, but a solution.
Yes.
Unfortunately, when it comes to this, a lot of times you may not get the solution right away.
Yes.
It may take time. It may take a couple of different people. I'm always big on, if I don't know the answer or I don't have the answer, I will do my absolute best to get you an answer or get you to someone who does have a better background or a better chance of answering that question.
Right. I think listening to you, I wonder how many times people have tried to open up to me and say something, and I just wasn't listening, or
your mind wasn't there.
I wasn't mindful of it.
Yep.
And then I just glossed over it, or
Didn't
really address it or change subject. And then that person's like,
yeah,
like, oh, well.
Yeah, screw Sam.
Yeah, like I tried and he just wasn't particularly receptive.
He doesn't care about me. Yeah.
Right, right. And I feel like that's going to make me feel more attentive to when people speak, because there's a lot of opportunities, even at the gym, where people do speak to you.
Yep.
And if I don't necessarily tune in and say, wow, that comment might be a prelude to something else that they might want to say. Like, they're just kind of feeling me out to see if I am receptive. And if I just take it into some other superficial response or something very flip, then maybe I won't give them that opportunity to open up and say more. And so not everything is going to be a huge, deep discussion, but I do have to be attentive and see, and also actually with my kids too, I was just thinking about that. Sometimes they say little things and you can either kind of blow it off or you can give it some space to breathe and let them open up and talk a little bit more. Yeah. And I think that, how many times are we with our friends where that might actually be the case?
Part of, just one last thing, part of what I noticed is that people feel a lot more comfortable opening up to people that they don't necessarily have to see every day.
It's true.
And that they're not going to look at every day, and they don't have to sit there and say, this person knows something that almost nobody knows about.
Right.
And it's almost a comfort to sit there and say, if I were to sit there and I know, and I've just used this as an example, I've opened up to Adam Ramsden about something, especially when we did the nutrition stuff.
Yep.
Didn't see Adam every day, but when I did see him, 2 or 3 words about, hey, how you doing?
Yeah.
Talk me off when we did my first fitness challenge here, and I was feeling like absolute death the first week of that nutrition challenge. I remember Adam calling me and seeing me maybe like once a week. How you doing?
Yeah.
Hang in there.
That's awesome.
It's okay. And that's all I needed. But nobody else knew that that's what was going on. But I was comfortable because I didn't see Adam every day.
Right. That's
And
a
I
good
think
point.
a lot of people sit there and say, I don't necessarily want to be around a person that knows maybe this personal detail about me.
So everyone listening, you might be surprised how many people you are that person for. Yeah. And always look for those opportunities. Yeah. All right. Thanks, Sean. We're going to get into, how fitness is kind of incorporate into, helping mental health, how it can hurt mental health. That'll be next week. So thank you guys. We'll see you next time. Thank you, everybody, for taking the time out of your day to listen to the Herd Fit podcast. Be on the lookout for next week's episode.